Well, I suggest we start. More people will probably trickle in as we kick off. My name is Louis Dijkstra. I'm the head of economic analysis at DG for Regional Urban Policy, and I'll be your moderator today. I can speak louder. My job is very simple. Introduce, invite the speakers to present, keep them on time, and moderate the questions. So thank you for coming. The first speaker is going to be, where are we? Okay, well, Almudena Moreno Minguez. Apologies for the pronunciation. Please come and I suggest we take, there's only 3 presenters, so I suggest we take up to 20 minutes. I'll indicate the time from there, and over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you for attending this session, and thank you to the European Commission to give me the opportunity to be here. My name is Almudena Moreno Minguez. I'm a full professor of sociology at the University of Valladolid in Spain. In this presentation, I will briefly review the literature on the policy implications of demographic and family change for social cohesion from the perspective of inequality between families. The starting point is that the second demographic transition, a theoretical framework, proposed that rising individualism and secularism led to new attitude that drives new families and lifestyles. This new family form, resulting from divorce, single parent, reconstituted third custody, are associated with precariousness and socioeconomic disadvantages of children and parents. As a result, the gap between families, discontent, polarization, and the fragilization of family relationship increase. This context increased the risks to social and political cohesion of our state and societies. The main conclusion is that it's necessary to focus attention on families as a source of inequality, conflict, and polarization. I will now present some of the results of the main studies carried out in attempt to link studies on family inequality with studies on social cohesion. Well, the first point is to present the social context for reflection. Global context present an increasing number of challenges coming from the change in demographic, household structure, family change, employment trends, and revision on traditional gender roles. The result is the processes of growing inequality, social conflict, and social polarization, producing a awakening of social bonds and social cohesion. In this context, states and markets are not responding correctly to these challenges of societies. In this context, it's important to highlight the relevance of social sciences in providing the comprehensive and contextual framework to social, cultural, and economic mechanisms that are explaining these changes. Our challenges and social research are to critically review the concept that social scientists are holding in relation to the processes of social change that are redefining social reality. There is an accurate diagnosis of the covert processes of inequality that are taking place in order to contribute to design of public policies that contribute to reducing the inequalities that weaken social bonds. From a critical perspective, we wondering about questions that articulate this presentation. First, what do we understand by social cohesion? How is social cohesion related to demographic and family change and what has to change in public policies? And finally, why is social cohesion important? Well, the main purpose of presentation is to offer interpretation based on available empirical results on how the increase in family diversity is generating new situations of inter and intra-family precariousness and inequality that have repercussions not only on individual and social well-being, but also on social cohesion. Based on the interpreted basis of the family as a changing institution that adapt to the new social requirement, result from demographic, political, cultural, technological, and feminist change. We will reflect on how the family interacts with public policies, giving rise to different processes of social inequality that threaten the social bonds that have made coexistence and social cohesion possible in the classical terms. Finally, to provide rigorous arguments for improving territorial planning, the provision of public services for the population, and the appropriate design of redistributed and protected policies. There are different paradigms that have been used to interpret the process of social change. The first, the paradigms of the second demographic transition, change in family, demography, socioeconomic and cultural behaviors produced in the last decade of the 20th century that gave rise new types of household and family structure, as well as new relationships between sex as consequences of cultural change operate through the drivers of demographic change. The second transition demographic paradigms emphasize change in individual demographic behavior as explanation for inequality of opportunities. The consequences of culture and socioeconomic transformation is the increase in individualistic values and attitude that increase the fragilization of social ties and relationships, so social fragmentation and precariousness, leading to an increase in social inequality that in most situations had a family's basis. Other consequences is the emergence of new demographic trends, family pluralization, fertility reduction, population aging, the complexification of youth transition, on the precariousness of work and family. On the other hand, the paradigms of comparative perspective focus attention on the context and policies across country and regions. It's based on macro analysis of social policies, welfare state, and inequalities. From comparative perspective, the association between the risk factor, pluralization of family, and precariousness is shaped by a structural and institutional factor such as labor maker and policies. The comparative social policy literature considers policies as a driver factor to demographic and socio-demographic trends. And finally, from this interpretative framework, family inequality is the result of the lack of public policies and the failures of redistributed policies. Well, to associate social and demographic trends with social cohesion, is necessary to understand conceptually the inequality. The concept of cohesion social is complex and confused. According to Baylis, cohesion is a continuous social process that affects several social agents and institutions. According to O'Connor, distinguish three dimensions to social cohesion: the types such values, identity, and culture, difference and division such inequalities and inequalities, cultural diversity, and geographical divisions. In turn, social cohesion is a political concept that is essential for the fulfillment of the three core values of the Council of Europe: human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Therefore, social cohesion based on three independent pillars: social inclusion, social capital, and social mobility. The World Bank defines cohesion very broadly as a state of affairs in which group of people demonstrate an attitude for collaboration that produces a climate for change. In all these definitions, political action plays a fundamental role in reducing economic, regional, demographic, and cultural inequalities. There are a lot of theoretical perspectives to study the concept of cohesion social, the functional perspective and a structural perspective, but it's very, very academic, and I pass over there. Now I'm going to present several examples of social economic inequalities, family chain, and social cohesion. My hypothesis is the increase in single-parent, reconstituted, and cohabiting families resulting from divorce and new family lifestyles, alternative to two-parent and married families, is bringing new form of cover inequality and precariousness associated with gender inequality and market labor precariousness. According to this hypothesis, I consider several questions. First, what evidence do we have on the increase in inter and intra-family inequality as a consequences of these processes? How does this process of family inequality and social change related to the demographic processes of social stratification? How do states, markets, policies, and legal systems react to these challenges? How to review the traditional concepts, heteropatriarchal family gender roles, parenting, war and family violence, child well-being, and create gender equitable policies for social cohesion? Well, the main findings of the studies highlight demographic and socioeconomic causes. Empirical evidence corroborate the negative effect that family diversity is having on a stratification of families and the equality of opportunities. On the other hand, economic and child well-being is lower in non-intact families, single parent, reconstituted, shared custody, than in two-parent families. According to Lanau, the high deprivation among children in reconstituted household and single parent is the expression on the higher incidence of poverty among those households, rather than difference in resource allocation. The increase in inequality between families and child deprivation families is associated with socio-demographic stratification factors such as education, employment, and gender. Therefore, they had consequences on families and children. What are these consequences? Family structure is a key factor in the educational and employment trajectories on young people, and therefore in the intergenerational transmission of inequality, being another factor on instability and social conflict that undermines the foundation of social cohesion. On the other hand, involvement and parenting styles play an important role in explaining educational difference between adolescents from intact and non-intact families. negative effect on non-intact families on children could be explaining in terms of the precariousness and economic disadvantages associated with this type of families. Other studies shows that in those European countries where social and family policies aimed at non-intact families and gender equality are applied, the gap between families and the indicators of deprivation and child well-being is smaller. Non-intact family has negative consequences on children educational achievement, health, and even on the future behavior of young people. And we find similar results for children living in cohabiting couples. Well, the conclusions about these studies and for researchers is we identified the causes of the lack of social cohesion and increasing polarization. On the other hand, social fragmentation results from family inequality. Most of the studies of cohesion social don't consider the families as a source of inequality. It's urgent to introduce the family inequality in the policy design. Child and youth policy committed to equal opportunities and social cohesion should take in account parenting and divorce, work and family balance policies, income and employment support policies for disadvantaged families. These policies could reduce the risks of socioeconomic deprivation associated with not intact families. On the other hand, diversity of family typologies had contributed to increasing socioeconomic and cultural inequality in disadvantaged families and children, having a clear impact on social cohesion in the 4 or 5 life course trajectories and this motivation to participate in public life, increase social conflict and distrust toward institutions. Policies based on this evidence will contribute to reverse for transition based on the intergenerational reproduction of inequality, as well as to enable appropriate policies aimed at income compensation, development on childcare, family work, and child well-being in the most vulnerable families. Thank you. This is this is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And sorry for my bad English.
Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your research with us. We'll take a few questions, and I believe there's a roaming microphone at the end. We have a first question there. And useful to speak into the microphone for the people on Zoom. So thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor Moreno. First of all, I absolutely celebrate you and thank you for everything that you shared with us. I'll make one comment and one question to you. The comment is that for some sad reason, the European economists have not managed to catch up on everything that you said. And everything that you said has already been taken on board by Gary Becker. And his work is fundamental in the recent work in the National Bureau of Economic Research in the States, especially the one on racism and discrimination, which you were highlighting. So I would strongly recommend and encourage the economists not to slip over this really important work. And if they lack the imagination of incorporating them in their work, check a little bit Gary Becker, who hasn't done everything, but he was a sociologist and he started the work in the way. The second thing is you mentioned that your results are relevant for polarization, and polarization is something which is a dark zone for everybody. So can you expand a little bit more in addition to what you said, to how this family dynamics relates to the polarization. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Thank you so much for your comment. Well, the concept of polarization is very complex and confused. When I refer to the association between polarization and new change on family, I refer to the lack of trust the families in the institutions and the policy and the redistributive policy to avoid the inequality and the discontent of this type of family. This is the relationship which I established in between polarization and new families and inequalities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your interesting research. I think that there is a certain limit among European action, because this is clear subsidiarity. So I'll speak in the afternoon in my closing speech about the European Pillar of Social Rights, EU level targets, and so on. But I think that a lot of your messages are addressed to national policymakers. It's not about European level action, because we're very limited in that. But we work with a lot of recommendations. We have the child guarantee recommendation adopted last year, and we have long-term care recommendation. We are really trying to give some guidance with probably or other choices for national policies, but we cannot impose national policies. But I think that your very timely and to reality relevant analysis about what are the implications, what are the impacts of the new forms of families on the next generation are very important, because we are talking about transitions and so on, but we see the change of family patterns all over Europe. And also it requires obviously different approach to ensure that children in these families are well taken care of, that they have their prospects and they're supported throughout their youth and until adulthood. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment. Yes, I agree with you. The European Commission don't have responsibilities, national responsibility, but it's important to recommendation, because the recommendations advert sign to the national policies about governments. And for my consideration, is important to recommendations about the European Union.
Council recommendations, which means that member states.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I would invite Violeta Kilar from Krakow to give the next presentation. Let's give an applause for the previous speaker.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's a true honor for me be here and able to share of my researches during this conference. This 4 years, such an economic geographer, I have been conducting research in 2 fields of studies, in the area of location and operation of enterprises various size and the impact on the environmental conditions for the creation of entrepreneurship ecosystem, but also changes in socioeconomic development in Poland and other countries, European Union, with particular emphasis on importance of industry and human resources is the process, as well as the field of education, of geography and entrepreneurship of various levels of education. Today, I would like to present the preliminary results of my research on human capital is the key of the regional cohesion. At present, at present, we are witnessing rapid and profound changes in Europe and worldwide at various levels, economic, political, social, which fundamentally affect the existing reality and our perception of it. These changes are, on the one hand, influencing the unification of the world space toward globalization. Still, there is also noticeable polarization of the world space in national and regional arrangement. It seems that these global changes are unstoppable, but according to research, human capital plays a fundamental role in bringing disparities between countries and regions. We have many definitions of human capital, but theoretical and empirical research to date show this, it is the level of human capital development that determines both currently and future socioeconomic development and regional cohesion. The quality of human capital and human resources in a given area determines to a significant extent its ability to create and absorb innovations, so important in shaping the economy of the future. This is an important reason why continuous and long-term investments should be made in improving the quality of human capital, especially in a regional level. The issue of investing in human capital to bridge the gap between certain area, the world, and to strive for cohesion in European Union has been addressed to many authors. Above all, because it's a key issue in the building a socioeconomic future. At the heart of this process is the human being and the need for his and her and direct presence in this process, for example, development of modern industry in the future. With reference to above premises, the purpose of today, my presentation, it will be present a preliminary analysis of the special differentiation of human capital in the region of the European Union, determining the level of human capital development on a regional basis, allow to identify areas where is need for long-term investment and in improving human capital parameters. But we also not forget that support is also needed in the areas which today are distinguished by a high level of human capital to sustain the existing state of affairs. However, the publication which I prepare many empirical measures and synthetic measures which will be present how and factors which building human capital and indicators in individual areas. I'm sorry. And correlation with selected cohesion measures. However, we need to remember that investment in people brings many long-term benefits. as many levels. It's not just in terms of moving towards regional cohesion. While many repetitive mechanisms, human activities can or will be replaced by machine activities in the future, the creativity resulting from the development of human capital, for example, which is so necessary to development and implementation of innovation, cannot be achieved without long-term investment in people. Therefore, the need to recognize. I'm sorry. Thank you. We should recognize and needs so that resource and activities related to development of human capital are directed in the long term to the area requiring this investment is crucial in this process. The resources of human capital in literature are perceived and measured in following dimension: competences and experience, knowledge and skills, health and efficiency of the organism, attitude to life, making of social capital. But measurement accuracy understood the degree to which empirical data and theory support the interpretation of result of the proposed application of measurement tools. Results for a certain purpose is constantly considered in social science. It is a cardinal property. In analysis, the human capital stock, I have narrowed the issue to today's presentation down a few selected basis parameters to show the phenomenon, yet the complexity of the human capital structure is much greater. The research also took into account the concept of Samuel Messick concerning the measurement procedure in social science. The measures I have adopted to define human capital in my analysis for the purpose for today's presentation, it's tertiary education attainment, distribution of pupils and students enrolled in general and vocational programs by education level, life expectancy, person at risk of poverty and social exclusion. When analyzing tertiary education, the situation is weakness in region highlighted in red on the map, where less than 1/3 of the population in this age group has tertiary education. There's a region excluding the capital city regions in Romania, but also Bulgaria, Hungary, Czech Republic, Croatia, and Italy. Regarding the participation of pupils and students in general and vocational programs by educational level, the smallest proportion benefits from this form of future education is in Portugal, Bulgaria, and Croatia. Looking at the map, showing life expectancy, the countries on eastern border of the European Union stand out negatively, including mainly Bulgaria, still Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, but also Hungary and some region in Poland, where life expectancy is between 72 and 76 years. So the map showing regions, next map showing regions at risk of poverty and social exclusion also refers to this as the region in Romania, Bulgaria, but also Greece and southern Italy and southern Spain, where as much as 30 to almost 50% of population is at risk of poverty and exclusion. Basis of the analysis, the above indicators, it can be concluded that the problem area in which there is a urgent need to invest in human capital to move towards regional cohesion in European Union, our region Romania, Bulgaria, but some respect also Hungary, Croatia, and Italy. So we could say it's not, we have still must to do a lot in this human capital and what we should be doing. This is the picture confirmed, but another indicator used to measure the multifaceted potential of human capital is the Human Capital Index. The index measured the contribution of health and the education to the productivity of individuals and countries. It is awarded in microeconomic research. Its variation across in the world is considerable, while the European Union in HCE is a high level, ranking from 0.6 in Bulgaria and Romania to 8 in the most European Union countries. This means that while the level of human capital development in European Union at the level of countries is high, but is the crucial devolve into the regional variation of this phenomenon. The last in the NUTS second level, and preferably, I think, even more detailed scale, for example, in NUTS 5 level. I believe that the process of bringing the human capital gap is essential to be attentive the design of education. Both the process itself and the content concerning education at a given level of children, but also early age, young people and adults, education process should be focused both on cognition, but also of learning and developing skills, especially soft skills. Those are the one will be helpful for every stage of life, and we all want to adapt to rapidly changing condition. At the same time, developing human capital, especially related to raising the level of education and training, developing scientific and technological infrastructure, raising on level of development of modern information technology, measure of to offset and affect aging population, migration, and employment are the most important contemporary global, including European Union challenges. To sum up, measures to improving the quality of human capital are the key importance, the socio-economic development of region, countries, and the global economy, both today and the future. The development of innovation and search of the implementation of new directions of development at each level depend on resources of human capital, while economic capital support the process. Harmonious sustainable and long-term development can only take place by taking care of human capital, which in my opinion, can neither now the future be replaced and and anything else. When we speaking about human capital, we still should remember about demographic and technological changes will have an uneven impact on regions, and disparity may increase. To avoid this, it is necessary to design permanent, systematic, and long-term activities, taking into account reality, the environment, and need to promote and raise awareness and the stability among potential recipients. I believe that some decision should be made in regional level, some in country level. We hear that in any papers, but we should remember that the long-term improvement of human capital resource is above achieving both territorial, social, and economic cohesion, but also about caring of people, they need and they own development. It's not only for political reason, but social reason. Thank you so much.
Okay, same process as last time. We have a roving microphone and we have some questions. Andriana and gentleman in the back, and then let's collect all three, and then we'll give you some time to respond.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was very interesting presentation and very much to the point. I want to ask about the human capital index, because you say you measure it between 0 and 1, and you reported 0.6 in Bulgaria and 8 in other member states. So I wonder. Thank you.
No, I can wait.
Well, thank you very much. And there's yet another lady that had a question. You didn't see her. So I was wondering whether you have ever looked at a more disintegrated way on the educational component of human capital. What is the provision of education for children of rich families and children of poor families? This is something which is a huge problem in the UK, but I believe might give a different geography of inequality and human capital if you look at it this way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is coming more from a practitioner perspective, because I work for the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, and we implement education programs in 13 countries, in moderate and emerging countries according to the European Innovation Scorecard. And it was good to see that we need these long-term programs, because my experience is when you already have selected a good network, you're getting good results and you have the trust of the local stakeholder, the funding ends, and you need to start over. And that's an issue that at least, we are funded by the Horizon Europe. And maybe what we need to do, unfortunately, is to redress these stakeholders to other European programs, which are less focused on co-funding and the financial sustainability. So this is really, really challenging on the ground. But I'm really interested in your results. So later I will ask you for the presentation. But the challenge is the long term, because you need to be competitive and also be open to new partners. But it's about trust and this balance between European and local perspective. So it's really necessary.
Maybe I give you the opportunity to reply to those three, and then maybe you reply first. And then
Okay, it's my mistake. It should be 0.8, not 8. It's my mistake. Yeah, but do you have answer about education? I think it depends of countries. For example, I could say in Poland, the most important is education public, and it's depends. But I think it should be like that, because if we have public good education, we don't need a private school in very high level education. And I think in cohesion policy, it should be doing something, everything what they could to do to public education will be much better and step by step be better in the years. Mhm. Mhm. I don't research that still, but it's a good question, really good question, because I think in some countries, also in Europe, it could be important questions, really important. Yeah. Yes, and last one. Sorry. I participate in 5 European Union projects of education in many partners from abroad, and from UK, from Germany, from Belgium, and so on, for Hungary. And what is the problem? When projects finish, we have a lot of materials. We have some pupils who involved in this project. But what's the next? We don't have the place when people could take the materials, promotion of this result of projects, because it's if projects have 4 years, usually we use it, the materials, because we participate of that, our partners also. But what in the next? Nobody knows if we have some project like that. It could help them in many lessons, many works for teachers, but also by themselves in personal develop. I prepare many materials for many, I think, institutions in Poland and in UA, but always we ask, what the next? We could do many things, but it's not for everyone. Usually people don't know about that. Some people know, in some region they know, in some schools which participate with that, but that's it. I think this is the point, this is the problem, huge problem to the next step. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hello, Violetta, is that the name? Okay, nice name, nice presentation, nice ideas. It's not my core, but however, I don't think the same as you do. I'm from Portugal. My name is Jose. I come from banking. I work in defense, geostrategic. I'm also a university teacher, but I think this is normal here. I have straight ideas on human capital. Mm-hmm. We can be on a room, very nice seated, talking about human capital, but with some examples. I have a friend who is the president of a Portuguese company. Portuguese company is one of the best in the world doing airplane maintenance, military airplane maintenance. This Portuguese company had been brought by a Brazilian company called Embraer that 3 years ago had been brought by Boeing. Mark Antonio has a small problem. He don't have aeronautic engineers, because in our country we have 8 aeronautic engineer's degree by here. Where can he hire it? Nowhere. The problem, so Marc Antonio made a OGMA Academy to form other engineers into aeronautic engineers. But you know, the same problem you have, I have, you have in Poland. You're British. Listen, hey, you're British. That's it. That's it. That's right. She give me, what's your name, please? Annie, I love you all. That's it. We have engineers all over, but when they, or nurses or doctors or whatever that you need all over, but when they come to our country, you have to present your diploma, and maybe your diploma will be okay, or maybe not, but you have to wait 1 year, 2 years, maybe more. And yes, and you see, you may wait in Portugal because it's Portugal. Portugal is in the corner. We like the sun. We are lazy. But no, in Poland, you have to wait. And where are you from, my lady? So you have to wait. You have to wait in the European Commission also. Yes, because you have to wait is not because of the European Commission, it's because of the professional orders. And you have to get a request from professional orders, you see? No, it's internal procedure for many countries, not mine also. Yeah, I can. So also, we got lots of migrants that come from Eastern Asia, migrants that come from Middle East. You have to be patient, my friend. They are engineers, they are IT specialists. But you know, they come to my country and they come working in the fields and nobody cares what are their skills. Nobody asks for it. Nobody does this joint work to match the skills with whatever the working market need. So, what's your name? What's your name, please? I'm Andrea. Okay, Andrea, I think this question is for you. What can these cohesion funds do to put things right, to put these kinds of things right, and to get the best opportunity on human capital to get the jobs we need and the skills we need? Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I will try to be quite fast. Actually, it's most a comment or a contribution to the other comments. Thank you very much for the presentation and for, let's say, stressing the relevance of education. I think looking at education from the perspective of cohesion or regional policy presents several challenges. In a way, most of the data, comparable data from education are national level. For instance, we were talking about inequalities and family background. There are some indicators that are comparable, but mostly are the PISA, the PIAAC from the OECD, and those are not designed to be representative at regional level, but they are national, apt for national level comparisons. Also, in terms of regional data, education implies a very strong institutional variation in the structure. So also when we are measuring about participation in vocational education, we are putting together the vocational system in Germany, which is a dual system, which implies a work contract, with the vocational system, for example, in Italy, which is a school-based. So there are strong differences that are in a way difficult to be accounted in terms of regional indicators. So it's very interesting, the theme. I think we need really some specification in terms of the data, and mostly they are not available at the moment. Another point with respect to the human capital, in my opinion, is the connection to the demand of work, so to the economic system. Because with the production of qualifications only, we cannot explain a certain level of employment for young people in different regions. So it's really a sort of a configuration of skills ecosystem matter, probably, or at least this is my opinion. Thanks a lot. More comments.
Thank you very much. First, yes. Thank you. I love Portugal and I know what you're talking about. I've been in Évora a few times. So, you see, not to mention Lisbon, how many times. But okay, starting with your question, what cohesion policy can do for matching the labor market needs for skills is exactly what European Social Fund Plus and will be doing and what ESF currently is doing, because we have the very strong connection about the demand of the skills, developing operations so that people who are unemployed acquire these skills that are relevant to the labor market, but also people who are losing their job or whose job is changing are also getting requalification, upskilling and reskilling. On the point about qualifications recognition in the European Union, we have no problem. We have, tell me an example.
Spain is worse than us.
Oh, I'll examine that further, I promise. I'll examine that further. But the fact is, as Annie said, there are countries who are really exporting tertiary educated people and vocational education and training levels as well. So this means that they are recognized and they work in the profession that they have been trained. They are not working in the fields. We have started a few years ago, and I think it's quite a slow process because of additional background analysis of what are the qualifications received in Middle East countries after 2014, the migration crisis. We have a number of professions already with qualifications that have been recognized. If somebody comes from Middle East with a certain profession, the equivalence of this profession in European terms is already there, but it's a long process. We haven't done for all the professions that. Yes. On the projects and the questions that projects finish and what happens, we need to look for new funding. The projects should be used. They should not be projects for themselves. They should be becoming, they could be part of a testing exercise, and they should become part of the mainstream policy. So the question about why did we do a certain project comes first. Was there a demand? Was there, or if the result is good, we should sell it to the policymakers so it's used and implemented. We don't need to continue projects which rely only on European funding. And for Horizon Europe, we have now in the 21-27 legislation, specific reference to, especially in the area of education, taking up the good projects and scaling them up within the ESF programs in the member states. So we are doing this connection. So I'll stop here, but I can talk. Thank you.
I think
My time has started.
in few sentences answer. And first one, I think cohesion policy and money which we spend of that should help prepare the base for adult people, because it's not only problem for young people, but if we spend this money for base, for their skills, for develop themselves, and now also motivated to develop themselves, because now what we observed is huge problem, because young people don't thinking about that. Don't if we give them anything, they say no, thank you, I don't want develop the skills. We know they need it, but they don't want to do it. And second, okay, we have the same problem. It's many professions. In many professions, for example, for teachers, yeah, we have some countries it's not the problem, but I could say in my countries it's a huge problem. People don't want to do it. Why? So motivated to develop some professions which we need in labor market is the huge challenge. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ani Tubaji, our last presenter. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you very much to everybody who presented till now and for everybody who is here. My name is Ani Tubaji, and I'll present you a work with Simon Rudkin, a colleague of mine who is developing a specific kind of methodology, which is called topological data analysis. He's developing it together with Pavel Dlotko, who is working in the Max Planck Institute. And a big thank you for them for sharing this methodology with me, because there are only 3 centers in the world that are currently aware of how exactly to use this topological data mapping. Of course, I'm using a very small fraction of the huge potential of this method, but I think it is very helpful to us in order to understand how to map the context, because the context has a life of its own, and its structure is different than the geographic map. Okay, it has a map which is invisible. So the context has a life of its own, which I describe as cultural gravity. There are places where the context is more favorable and attracting human capital, attracting the attitudes, and attracting the people who like these attitudes in order to have the milieu to solve problems correctly. And then in the economic literature, there is the notion of economic gravity. So this is where the inputs concentrate and then where the output is flourishing. So in order to understand what I'm talking about, I would like first to introduce you my paradigm. So I'm a cultural and regional economist. This means that I'm interested in how the attitudes of people shape in a place, and how when you have more than one person, their attitudes form something which is called culture. Culture does not exist on individual level. That's why we have something which is called cultural capital, which many, like Pierre Bourdieu, have conceptualized in terms of people having it, but it is something that you can have only when you have a society and only when you have a context. And I'm lifting up this notion of cultural capital from the individual on the local level. So this cultural capital differs across space, and depending on how it concentrates in space, it creates this different cultural gravity. Okay. Once you consume cultural products, once you consume tangible or intangible forms of culture, which is from the cultural industry, there is something which economists call an externality. And this externality is the ideas and attitudes that remain in your head. Okay, so again, from the point of view of economists, what people want to do is called demand, and what is given by institution is called supply. So these two things meet, and they meet somewhere in a point, which is the equilibrium of the point is what's being offered, and hopefully it has been done very efficiently. So if it is done efficiently, the first economists from Adam Smith onward think that this will happen very naturally, equitably, and fairly, and also efficiently, right? So to spend well. Well, we all know that doesn't happen. So the question is why the markets have consistent failures, right? Then there is yet another club of economists from whom I like only the father, Buchanan, who said that everything can be a market, right? So I'm thinking about all markets in the world being distorted in their equilibrium because of the cultural gravity which pulls people up and down. Now, why this makes sense in economics? Because we know that when there is a spillover or there's something which is different than price, it shifts the demand, right? So if it is favorable, it shifts it to the right. If it's not favorable, it's shifted to the left. So when you have attitudes in a place which are favorable, which are creating a milieu which is conducive to cooperation, to sharing, to being related in a constructive way with the rest of the population, this shifts the demand for making something together to the right. And respectively, if it is a closed milieu, which restricts the number of people that you want to cooperate with. This shifts the demand to the left. Now that you have this understanding as economists of what I'm doing as a cultural economist, let me show you what exactly I want to do here. I want to map this cultural context and to show you that actually it is the invisible hand of Adam Smith. Okay. Normally economists would satisfy to say, oh, this competition. And I'll argue this is a special case because whether you compete or not is an attitude, right? So fair enough, it is competition, but it's much more than competition. It is the attitude towards just any choice. And that's how culture penetrates all economic choices. And that's why we have socioeconomic development and not just economic development. And then we have to clearly see how the cultural context creates what the economic literature knows as frictions. So there is the economic development, it should redistribute, it should be equitable, but it's not. There is no cohesion, and it is because there are frictions that can very well be traced, because culture is not something that is only to the individual. Culture is place specific. So we can see how culture evolves. Now, hopefully you're on board with me. Now, there is another economist that I heard mentioned yesterday and whom actually I love. He's Hans-Berg Rossi. He's now among the heads of the OECD. And he is working very precisely, mathematically, on the redistribution of growth. His work on spatial frictions is something which is seminal in modern economic, regional economic, urban economic literature. Not that he has found out the hot water, and I'm actually criticizing him here, because what he does about cultural, the cultural component in the frictions, he says culture is a constant. There are places that have Coliseum and places that don't have Coliseum, so we can just factor this in, how attractive a place is according to culture. But my argument is the Coliseum is just part of what culture is. So first of all, he's not thinking of culture in a sufficiently comprehensive manner, because culture is a very complex and multidimensional entity. And next, it has the characteristics of being dynamic and stochastically changing. What do I mean by these things, which are my main criticism to Hans-Berg Rossi's approach to the frictions? So it is dynamic because I may have the Coliseum, but I may have today a lot of concerts in a place, and tomorrow I may have very few concerts. And this obviously characterizes the milieu in a different manner. And as we know from Richard Florida, the tolerance of a place quite strongly correlates with the cultural activity nowadays, right? So if you have a more flourishing milieu, more active milieu today, it will be a proxy for a more tolerant milieu, okay? So the fact that some things from the past are inherited in our cultural heritage, fair enough, they're a stock. This stock also can be demolished, so it can also disappear. It's not a constant that will remain forever and ever. And also the living culture, this part which happens today, it's very problematic because it needs investment. So it is what we call endogenous, right? But then it can vary very strongly. So these things form a dynamic thing. Why it is stochastic? It comes from the gravity aspect. So think of migration. I am Bulgarian. I want to go to Germany. You are Belgian and you want to go to Germany. So Germany is Germany, whatever it is as a context, but I'm coming from a cultural background. So there is a cultural distance between me and Germany and between you and Germany that is different, okay? And then there are developments outside every economy that will create potential migrants, and then these potential migrants, given their distances, will decide whether they go to Germany or not. So there is a lot of room for stochasticity to happen here, which has nothing to do with the economic process in the place. So I think I've given you enough background why I am saying that Hans-Berg Rossi's approach to dealing with, where's the pointer? Dealing with the omega as a constant is actually wrong, okay? And he has to open this and to consider its dynamics in order to use this model in a way that it will predict the redistribution of human capital across space in a realistic and non-biased manner. So this is This is essentially taking everything that was said in the first two presentations and translating it in maths, okay? So this said, I can also be soft and I can paint it this way. So you have here the cultural heritage and living culture, which are in immaterial and material manner, which will speak to everybody who is from the cultural capital of Crosby school, and they form the local cultural capital. So this is what places have, okay? And then these places can have these two components in different balance. They may have a slim cultural heritage and very active local milieu. This would be something like the United States, right? They have a few murals on the street and hey, you know, that's their cultural heritage, but they are quite active in having the big broad show and so on and so forth. And then you may have places, you may think cultural heritage is a big thing in Broadway. But you may have things, of course, like the Coliseum, but actually there are things like Bulgaria, where I come from, which is absolutely rich of things which are like the Valley of the Kings, which is something like the pyramids in Egypt. But, you know, it's very poor now. So our living culture, as much as we are the country of the spirit, is very much slimmer in comparison to what it could be. So the balance between the cultural heritage and living culture, I present in another part of my work, but I call it the cultural entropy. Okay, so this is how, when I say that culture is very varied and very complex, this is true. You have to take all the complexity on board, but this doesn't mean invite the mess. It means use complexity theory to reduce the mess by channeling everything into the logical components, which are the exogenous and endogenous part of it, the cultural heritage and living culture, measuring the balance between them. Okay, and then if you have a higher cultural heritage prevalence, you will have a more closed milieu. And if you have a living culture prevalence, you will have living culture, more openness. But actually the best thing is the two components to be in perfect balance, right? I don't have the time to expand now why. You can check this particular paper. But if they're disbalanced, especially if they're disbalanced in favor of cultural heritage, this will create a milieu that has less appealing cultural gravity. This will attract less and less human capital, and this will shrink the local productivity. And that's how you will have the cultural gravity impacting the economic gravity of places. Places that shrink, obviously, will be less and less attractive, first for economic reasons now, after they have shrunk, and they cannot have even the prices for labor being attractive enough to attract the labor there. So this is how it looks like if you want to present it softer. Now, how do I define cultural gravity? This starts with a paper which appeared in Economic Geography in 2015, together with Professor Nijkamp, which thinks about the openness of a place interacted with the cultural distance of the arriving immigrant, right? And this was shown to impact where people go and also how much they can contribute once they go there. Okay, so if I'm Bulgarian and I end up in Germany, but they're stern with me, I'll contribute to Germany much less than if I go to the UK and they're more flexible with me. Okay. This concept of cultural gravity is something that I'm taking here using the data sets of the Eurostat and then the World Value Survey. So if you want, we can go through the data afterwards. Measuring cultural gravity in this way, I can show it for immigrants from the EU 15 and immigrants in Europe from the other countries other than the EU 15. And as you see, the places that attract immigrants from EU 15 simply are different from the places that attract or repel immigrants from the other countries. And plus, the attractiveness of places for the same group of immigrants changes between the year 2008 and 2018, which are the main years of my analysis. Then what seems to be driving also the difference is the cultural distance. So the cultural distance experienced in this process by immigrants from the EU15 is smaller than the cultural distance experienced for the countries which come from these areas of the world. Okay, so all these things will predispose how people will move and also how the economic productivity will redistribute across space, because it depends on the redistribution of human capital. Now, my analysis has 3 steps, of which I will show you only the last one because I have only 5 minutes more. So, but I won't completely skip the other 2. So the first one was to replicate my analysis from the economic gravity using the current data set, which is for 228 NUTS2 regions in Europe. So the difference is that before I checked how the local GDP is a function of the cultural gravity, and then additionally how the local human capital concentration, immigrants concentration, is a function of the gravity component. What I do here, I open a third element. I say how the highly educated immigrants are concentrated as a function of the cultural gravity, and the result here is that again we have a statistically important impact from the cultural gravity. The second aspect was to open the box of nonlinearities and spatial concentration. So I'm using the error, spatial error and spatial lag models. So the spatial lag model would be looking at how the local productivity or the local concentration of human capital is sensitive to its own lag over time, right? But the other one, the spatial error model, will allow me to see whether the attractiveness of a place has sort of a positive or negative impact on the areas around as well. So this is an extra thing that I do here. And the answer to this part of the exploration is yes, there is also a spatial dependence in the cultural gravity impact. And the last thing that I want to show you, so these are the estimations. The last thing that I want to show you are my topological maps. So what this thing is doing is it is looking at the clusters of similarity within the data. So first of all, I'm telling to the machine, there is a latent component, right? You can think of it as a factor, which is a function of these inputs. So this is a function of the distance, of the openness. This is what cultural gravity is. So please show me how the data that I have is clustered according to these components. And what it gives me is the structure that you see here. So this is how cultural gravity looks in the European regions in 2008. And this is how cultural gravity looks in the year 2018. Obviously, it has changed a bit, but what you see is that there are 2 big clusters in 2008, which is not cohesive enough. And then there is a complete dilapidation here, everything. I'm almost done. Then what also the topological data analysis does, and which is better than the normal mapping techniques, is that if I was about to map this on a normal geographical map, I'll ask, map me where there is one type of cultural capital, another kind of cultural capital. It will do it for me. But then if I ask, okay, what is the concentration of GDP in these 2 places? Now it will either map me the GDP and it will figure out how to connect these 2 different dimensions. Here, I have the clusters in the invisible resource mapped, and then I can ask this structure to be filled in with statistical information about some of the subcomponents of it. So what I do here, I'm asking, tell me what is the GDP contribution to the development in the areas which are in this cluster. And as you see, they are relatively poor places that have this cluster of cultural gravity. And then I can do the same kind of coloring according to a different criteria. I can ask, okay, how this structure relates with the concentration of immigrants from the EU15, and how it relates with concentration of immigrants from the other countries. As you see, the concentration of immigrants from non-EU 15 countries is higher than the concentration of immigrants from EU 15 countries in these poor places with this kind of clustered cultural gravity here. So that's what the invisible resource of cultural gravity looks like. Now let's see how the DTA map, the topological data analysis, looks when you ask to see how the GDP, the productivity of places, is structured in space, in the data space. So that's the level of connectedness and disintegration. Again, the poor are staying together, the rich are quite everybody on his own. So that's not good news for cohesion. And the thing has gone even worse here. Here, everybody is a lone rider. And on top of this, it has the similar development in the concentration of the immigrants. So that's how there is a structure of the cultural gravity, there is a structure of the economic gravity, and it seems that the linking component between them is what's happening with the human capital. It is consistent with the cultural frictions, but it gives a much deeper insight on what's happening in the invisible part of the resources and its dynamics. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Absolutely fascinating presentation. We have time for a couple of questions. Who would like to kick it off? Yes, and then Andres.
I'm not an economist, but I love the presentation and I think I understood most of it. But my question is about your model. You put culture as the exogenous variable, so at the beginning, and I was wondering what's your time perspective, like short-term, long-term? Because from my perspective, for me, culture is a dependent variable. And especially when we are considered cohesive policy, like all the work that we're trying to do is to change the culture to change that. So obviously I think it's a matter of the time scope that you're considering. So just wondering about that.
Thank you very much. Very nice question.
Thank you very much, Annie, for an amazing presentation. Just a small technical thing. Why do you want to base your paper, which is fascinating and very interesting and broader, on Rossi, Hansberg, and Wright, which are mainly a paper about Zipf's law that actually did not attract a lot of attention? You're going far broader than they are, so you might want to free yourself from the shackles of that narrow sort of analysis and concentrate on what you're doing, which is far more important.
Thank you for this.
Thanks, Andres.
Yeah. Thank you for this marvelous presentation. I was wondering, your database is solely made of NAT2 regions, so Europe. You don't have any data, so you couldn't measure cultural distance or whatever with incoming migrants to Europe, only intra-Europe. Is there a chance to expand that?
So thank you very much for the wonderful questions. I'll start from the first question, which was the most global one, and absolutely right. So first of all, there is no change and no development without cultural change. And as you're saying, that's what we try to change in order to have any other kind of change possible. The good news is that culture changes slowly. I mean, it's terrible because it's very rigid, but from the point of view of modeling, it will change much slower than the economic processes. So that's why we can think of it empirically as allowable to be thought of as the thing coming first. So if it is completely exogenous, from the point of view, I can talk about exogeneity only from the point of view whether it depends on current investment. So obviously what's from the past doesn't depend on emerging from the current investment, but it depends partially on maintenance. But okay, this is not so important. You can think of it as depreciation effect. But what really depends on emerging today is the living culture part, and this is endogenous. And this has to be modeled, and I do model it in most of the work that I do. Then Andres. Andres, you're a wonderful person. And you are a regional economist, which means that you're a plural economist. And that's what I'm doing. I'm being plural to the max. I want Rossi Hansberg to change his mind and attitude. And this will happen only if I speak in a way which is talking to him. I don't think that his work was about the ZIP flow. I have very big feelings about the ZIP flow, and I have something related with language on this line. This work, however, is seminal in terms of showing to the even more rigid neoclassical people that there is the role of migration here on regional level that distorts the picture and answers a seemingly strange question like there should be kind of general equilibrium and everything should be stable, and in the same time there are these inequalities in how it concentrates in different spaces, and he answers the question why. So I think he did a good job. Partially he left a very important component blind, and that's the role of economics, of science, of us as people, just helping each other to go ahead. And I don't think he'll hear, but I'm obliged to, I think. The last question was about the data. Yes, the data is not ideal. Yes, it's only 228 of all the regions in Europe. And yes, I do not have information about, but I don't have it here. And I have many papers in which I have tried to go better into the quantification of these things. Also, another thing which I do here, and I didn't have time to tell you, I'm using directly attitudes, but then I'm using the Schwartz index, which should be kind of the whole palette of attitudes that matter. Another way that I would do that is to use the tangible and intangible assets themselves and use them as proxies for the attitudes. And this is just a different way that you can approach using different number of as many as possible proxies, and then use factor analysis to reduce it to cultural heritage and living culture, which I always do in some way. I can use coming clustering, or I can use factor analysis, or a different kind of approaches. And once you reduce it to living culture and cultural heritage, then you can estimate, okay, what is the balance between them with the Shannon entropy index in order to have the cultural entropy and to know what is the exact precise condition of this. Then you interact it with whether the prevalence is eventually from the cultural heritage side, and then you can know, but you can't, due to data limitations, you can't always implement the whole method, but you can try to.
No, it's not a question, it's a clarification. Maybe we're talking about a different paper, but Urban Structure and Growth by Rossi Hansberg and Wright is about Zipf's law, but it might be another one, which is even less relevant in the respect. Having said that, I'm all for plurality, but Stefan Rossi Hansberg is now saying how wonderful climate change is, because we will allow people from all over the world to move to Siberia and conquer Siberia. So there's a limit to plurality at certain points when science just goes.
I'm not saying he's plural, I'm saying I'm plural. I fully understand what you're saying. And I think showing to people their limitations, if you give them the better part of the doubt that they're intelligent people, maybe after some time they'll start reflecting and start cooperating. So I think cooperation between OECD and the European Commission and UNDP are necessary, are a must. And we have to establish the climate.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I like very much. I have a question. How do you define the culture, or what variables do you use to make the study? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So for me, culture is the attitudes that are combined together in a place, aggregated, and shaping the conglomeration of attitudes that are prevailing in a place. So attitudes are held by people. Culture is the agglomeration of attitudes in a place that establish a milieu. And then in this particular study, I used the Schwartz index, which is just available answers to relevant, important questions. I have it. This doesn't want to go back. It does. So they're here. The Schwarz. Whoops, no. Yeah, so these are the Schwarz indices. But as I said, these are just proxies, and the culture-based development approach is to use as many as possible indicators in order to avoid the underspecification of the model, because if you then this mathematical and quantitative people appreciate very, very seriously. If you have a factor that matters, and everybody says, oh, culture matters, this at least has been established. Well, if you measure a factor in a wrong way, insufficiently accounting for the variation of this factor, or wrongly accounting for the variation of this factor in a model, this leads to underspecification of the model, and this leads to bias. So this is a very important question. It can never be done perfectly, but at least it has to be based on taking different aspects of what culture is, rather than going for single indicator like, churches. Well, churches, but in the context of so many other things. So.
Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting, totally new for me analysis. But I was also having this question. You put in your previous slide the cultural heritage, which is the immobile heritage, and then you have the living culture. And I think that the living culture is the one deciding where people go. It's not I'm not going to Rome to live there because of the Coliseum, for sure. But I will go to live in Rome because it's very acceptable. It's very welcoming city. It provides good care for everyone. It gives freedom to everyone. So the Schwarz index is for me the decisive one. I don't know if you have separated the material from the immaterial.
Well, attitudes are a product of the consumption of living culture and cultural heritage. And here I'm using directly the attitudes as reported by the self-reported by people and then accumulated in the Schwarz index. About what you're saying, this is a question of utility, and the utility function of people is always different. I definitely will go for the Coliseum. So everybody has, different, no, but no, I strongly would go there to live for it, I really love it. So the point is that this is the idiosyncratic thing. Whether you like it, whether I like it, but generally we both agree that, well, maybe you to visit, maybe I to live, but we both think that that's remarkable. So that's the part of thinking of it as cultural capital. Rome holds this thing, okay? And I definitely will not have this, and you won't be attracted by a place that doesn't have it.
Sorry, I'm sure that if Italy changes in the next months, you will not go to live because of the Coliseum there.
Yeah, but my heart will ache for them.
Yeah.
Rather than other places that will not have that, and I'll feel them less close. Thank you.